Hey guys, I haven't done anything for a while. I just finished watching Neon Genesis Evangelion, the series, and the concluding movie. And I understand that a lot of people are kind of torn, perhaps not torn, but divided on the main character Shinji. A lot of people just find him to be kind of useless or maybe underwhelming. I think he should be more active, more, typical sort of shonen character, protagonist. A lot of other people are like, no, that's not the point of the show. The point of the show is just exploring personal identity and mental illness and anxiety and he's an anti-hero and whatever. I don't really think any of those are correct. Not terribly. Certainly not entirely. So, yeah, it's definitely not your typical, Naruto, Dragon Ball kind of approach to anything. It's not even really very typical of a lot of Gundam depictions of things, even though it's not that technically. It's a Shinji, right? Essentially, he's a 14-year-old kid who abandoned by his dad when he was younger. All he knows is his mom is dead. His dad left him. He's been living on his own, and suddenly he's effectively kidnapped by this chick and forced into this program to go fight in a war, in a post-apocalyptic war. Still in this program that is headed by his dad, but still can't get any attention from him. And the whole series, aside from the actual kind of war-fighting aspect, is him kind of trying to figure out who he is in the midst of not really understanding how his affections work, and most especially how, trying to prove himself to his dad and to himself via proving himself to his dad, basically. He's not really a macho character. He's not, for the most part, I feel bad for him. Especially in the beginning where he's just blindsided by this whole thing. Forced into something he doesn't know anything about, doesn't want to do, really can't do. Because of how the systems are built and kind of what goes into it, he is able to sort of take to it really well. And that's explored through the show and kind of the horrific nature behind the entire program. And ultimately it ends up showing how he effectively is his dad, but at the very, very end of the movie, the very last scene is sort of depicted him having a modicum of character development, and I think the intention is that he's going to not just be a repeat of his father. Right, that generational sort of curse is not, and the generational trauma and the generational abuse, while being reflected, is not inherently inescapable, which itself is a fantastic message, but I don't think that's really the point. It doesn't come across as the point, right? Because what's really, 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 really frustrating, especially as things ramp up towards the end, is just how, especially during the events of the movie and the sort of climax of everything, how resolutely self-pitying Shinji is, right? Because one of the themes throughout the series is this idea that he's useless and he needs to sort of make people happy, be people-pleasing, and he's doing, he's piloting, he's being the thing that they told him to do so that he can get recognition, specifically words of affirmation. And the contrast to that for him is just a feeling of uselessness, of being unneeded in the midst of being unknown, and that's sort of supplanted by getting this verbal recognition. But it's like the longer it goes on, it's almost like the more stalwart he is in willing this sort of depression to continue. Not in the way that depression normally works, where it just captures you and you're stuck in it, but rather, it all seems very, if not intentional, it's very, very ego-driven. It's a very willful pursuit of the feeling of uselessness, so that once he is useless, once he has made himself useless by refusing to act, by refusing to interact, by refusing to communicate, by refusing to help and do the things that he knows that he can do and that people need him to do, by simply shutting down and saying, no, I am going to be useless, I'm going to refuse. And then, look, I was right all along. I was useless all along. They hated me all along. I couldn't do it all along. Well, no, you just decided not to. You decided that the shortcut to fulfilling your ego by being right about being useless was preferable to the work of fulfilling your ego in attaining those words of affirmation, because they didn't happen as consistently as you wanted, because even though you took to this whole program really quickly, unexpectedly, it still took work. It didn't go perfectly overall. And, you know, it was this like immediate, like, oh, this ideal thing that's going to happen. Turned out there was still reality bound up in it. And so it wasn't good enough. So it was back to not being in the midst of people, and being in the midst of the people who, well, they were all, for the most part, terrible, egregiously awful people. Like, still just kind of determining to be one of that, and that's all he's going to be, is this sort of one-note lump of a person that needs people to feel sorry for him while also putting in no effort. And I think this is what's really, for me, highlights something that is incredibly important, that is very rarely, if ever, addressed in the common climate of social media, specifically social media around trauma, victimhood, mental illness, and neurodivergence. And I've certainly been guilty of this as well, is that there is this kind of false dichotomy that's implied that if you are in this group of neurodivergent, of traumatized childhood trauma, and whatever, in this case he is still a kid, right, which gives him a huge amount of leeway for not being mature, not handling things correctly. Like I said, everyone around him is absolutely culpable for being absolutely terrible and manipulative and just gross. It doesn't mean that, like, even despite all of that, when it comes to the point where he is actively making the choice to essentially get people killed, to directly get people killed, that his ego fulfillment via his uselessness and that self-fulfilling prophecy of being useless is so important to him that it doesn't matter that the people that have become closest to him are just being killed outright, and one or two right in front of him, still just having that self-pity and wallowing in it and existing and living in it no matter what still remains paramount. And so in the midst of all of living in this world that is so radically ableist and unforgiving and unempathetic, that does not mean that we are not still responsible for ourselves, that we are not still accountable and have to be held accountable within ourselves and amongst those around us for what we decide to do with what we have. Right? Because it's not Shinji's fault, it's not our fault, the lot that we've been given, the hand we've been dealt, the people that are abusive around us and to us, none of that is our fault. But when we take that and one-up it by deciding to also be terrible and stalwartly refusing to move outside of that mindset, that I am so important that the shallowest aspect of my trauma is going to be all there is, and I'm going to take that out on everyone around me to the fullest extent possible, in this strange attempt to try to get people to feel more sorry for me. And I can feel the fulfillment of that by them getting hurt and actually hurting people and inflicting them with further trauma is what makes me feel like, well, it makes me feel at all. It's just what I'm deciding, because it's the easiest thing to do, and it makes me feel important. By carrying that out and wielding it against others. Sometimes it takes the form of bullying, other times it takes the form of, like with Shinji, it's just absolute refusal to participate, to exist. Well, not to exist, right? He's seeking fulfillment of his existence, but in the worst, most harmful way to both himself and everyone else. And by the time it gets to the end of it, it's literally world scale. Everyone is going to die. Everyone. But also the people closest to him, most saliently those closest to him, who are physically actively there, and he's refusing to do anything except just force himself to feel sorry for himself. And that is it. The thing is, with depression, with self-pity, with disassociation, you still, when you're being physically dragged, you go on autopilot, you do the thing, you show up physically, even if mentally, emotionally, spiritually you're not there. But no, this takes will and effort and presence of mind and heart and emotionality and spirituality to refuse to this extreme that he does. And that's why it's so frustrating, because, like, yeah, it's kind of, on the one hand, it's not a useful argument to say, oh, he should just be any generic action hero. But it's equally unhelpful, and perhaps more harmful, to say everything about him is fully justified. All of his actions and responses are fine, because of how he's been abused, and because of how he has, the midst of trying to find his identity in the midst of everything. I could stop there, but I think it's really, really beautifully contrasted with Ray, the sort of another person in this program that he meets from the very beginning, who, they're kind of in inverse situations where he, full agency, full autonomy, full self-awareness, but has been totally neglected and is now just being used entirely as an object. She is a clone, essentially, has been created and trained and brainwashed to not have agency, to not regard herself in any way whatsoever. And yet, by the end of it, she still is able to make that step on her own to defy the person that has been brainwashing her and using her as an object the entire time, created her as an object the entire time. And still step out on her own and do the thing. And if she hadn't done that, then Shinji wouldn't have even been... And she had to go rescue him, essentially, when it should have been holistically the other way around. And not just at the end, repeatedly throughout the whole thing, but culminating on a worldwide scale at the end. And, those last moments of, when she, takes her final form, whatever, and he sees her, and he's horrified and disgusted and just, and at first it's like, okay, kind of understandable, just because it's weird. But then, roll back the scale for what really, for me, is the absolute most awful thing about him, is that at a certain point towards the end of the series, he defends where they live from this person who shows up, who is going to kill everyone if he is not stopped. And Shinji is the one who incidentally is best suited and positioned and is able to stop him, but has to stop him by killing him. This dude had infiltrated where they were, said some nice words to Shinji over a while. Maybe Shinji had a crush on him because he's bi or gay or whatever. And then he's, racked with guilt over killing someone. The typical trope of, I killed one person and I refuse to understand that they gave up their right to life whenever they came to kill someone else. In this case, everyone else. Which is a really frustratingly shallow trope, but okay. But then get to this last scene, or one of the last scenes, and Ray shows up, and he's terrified, but then immediately the dude shows up in the same form, same horrible, awful form afterward, and the kid, is elated, is gratified, is connected, is ecstatic, is, sexually gratified, all of this stuff. Just the exact opposite reaction, and this chick has been with you the whole time. You've been ignoring her the whole time. You should have moved her into your apartment with the kid and the other person taking care of you the whole time. She's dealt with everything by herself. You've ignored her the whole time. You've hated her the whole time because of how she's been used by your dad more than you have. And now she's coming to rescue you, and you're disgusted, you're terrified, but then the dude who came there to kill you and everyone else, because he said some nice things, and she didn't say the nice things, now you love him. And it was just so, that reaction made me so mad. Still am. Then it goes through all the end of it, all of his processing, through more of the self-pity, more of the I need the attention. She ultimately gets him to the point where he's willing to allow everyone who exists to retain their agency in because the ultimate idea is that everyone loses agency, but no one will be alone. So it's forcing everyone into this sort of nebulous state, kind of like an infinite Tsukuyomi type of thing, but like a shared consciousness. Worst possible conceivable form of invasion of privacy and a violation that can metaphysically exist. And it all comes down to, he would have presumably just gone for it, been like, yep, let's do it. I need everyone in me and with me all the time. I need to stop being alone by forcing everyone to be in my space, in my consciousness. Without doing any of the work, because he hasn't wanted to do any of the work any of the time, by connecting with people, functionally, traditionally, the way you kind of have to. If it's going to happen at all. Yeah, so Ray being there with him turns him enough to say, okay, let's not do this whole apocalypse thing. Let's turn everyone back to normal, to corporeal. But then he winds up on the beach with the other chick that's been the kind of second counterpart to him the entire time. And he is like an inch away from killing her. He strangles her nearly to death. Exactly as his father has done, exactly as this other usury chick has done. He, all the way up to that point, has still learned nothing, is still so absorbed in himself, in his self-pity, that no one else even matters, no life matters. In the very last second, he stops strangling her before she's dead. And I don't even buy it. I don't buy that it's character development. I buy a lot more that maybe when his dad was 14, he hadn't quite killed anyone outright yet. But as he grew older, he obviously did. 100% chance of that, or at least 100% possibility, that's still how he could grow up and turn exactly into that. But narratively, it's not supposed to be that. It's supposed to be that he's being someone different. Yeah, so all this is to say, there are nuances to everything. No one gets a pass. No matter how bad your state is, it doesn't give you the license to take what you have in your sphere of influence that you have, no matter how microscopic it may be, and still attempt to just continue that usage of others, continue that abuse of others, continue that, to willfully, knowingly, intentionally design the abuse and the neglect of others in response to how you yourself have been abused and neglected. Yeah. I think that's everything. I didn't have a lot of scripture like in mind thinking about all this. I brought this verse up because it made me think of Rey a little bit, because she's so like at peace with what she's doing the whole time, and Shinji not at all, right? The only thing he really seems to be at peace with is doing nothing to other people's harm specifically, and then telling himself that he's not okay with it, but still intentionally doing it and refusing to consider anything else, which inherently makes him okay with doing it and being it. Yeah, I think that's it. I think I'm out of steam. I'll talk to you guys later.